Welcome to the Lead Counsel Podcast, hosted by New York personal injury lawyer Tom Tona. Join us as we deep dive into the world of law and the business of law. Stay informed. Get ahead.
Hey, welcome to the Lead Counsel Podcast. This is your host, Tom Tona. I'm here with my co-host, Juliet. Jules, what's going on?
Hello. Welcome back, everybody. How are you today?
How you doing today, Jules? You good?
I'm doing fabulous. How are you today?
I'm excellent. So today's guest, we've been waiting for a while to have him on. I've been hearing such good things about him. His name is Charley Mann. And he's with Law Firm Alchemy, which is his company. Charley, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Tom, I'm doing well. Yeah, we had the opportunity to meet at the GLM Summit last year, and I had sort of seen you like on LinkedIn and stuff. Like, I like the cut of this gentleman's jib, right? So getting to actually meet you in person was cool, and I look forward to having you back on my show as well. But I'm glad to be here talking with you and with Jules. This is going to be a good time.
Yeah. And so I've heard amazing things about you.
I hope to disappoint.
Several people that I've spoken to are like, man, Charley's really delivering on the coaching front. So let's jump right in. What is Law Firm Alchemy?
Yeah, so we're a coaching courses and publications organization for solo and small law firms, really focusing on marketing and leadership topics for solo and small law firm owners. And I really emphasize the working with the owners because there's great, and I know you guys use this like EOS, right? That's a great way to organize a firm. I'm more there, and Law Firm Alchemy is there to organize the owner, the mindset, the entrepreneurial skill set and tool set to help you focus on being an entrepreneur more than being a lawyer who happens to own a law firm.
Right. So it's very much founded in like the E-Myth tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially E-Myth Revisited is what I would say, right? Because it's most of the people that I'm working with have taken some shot at the core E-Myth concept, and they took some type of jump, right? For the most part, I'm working with firm owners who say have hit around that $500,000 mark. So they figured something out, but now they're at that point of, why am I plateauing? So most of the folks I start with are going to be between about $500,000 to $3 million per year in revenue. And they've hit that point where they've already done several identity shifts, and identity is like my favorite topic in the world. Like, how you see yourself is how you operate in the world, and how do you transcend an identity that you've held on to for maybe a decade plus, and you've realized you need to make a shift, but you're so terrified of becoming a new person, right? I could go on and on about this. Maybe I will go on and on about that stuff today.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, helping them sort of meet that moment and go, all right, I need to become a new person here because the current me no longer suffices. And that transformation that's why it's Law Firm Alchemy, because alchemy is an impossible transformation, turning lead into gold, not a thing that actually happens. What's cool is a human being can become a totally different human being almost overnight when you have that light bulb moment where it just clicks. Like, I'm sure, Tom, you've had those moments in your life where it just like, boom, something clicked for you. You woke up and you're like,
yes,
oh, I'm a different person today than I was yesterday.
Yeah. And it's tough when you're already kind of at a certain size and scale and you have this epiphany. So we had that happen during the EOS process. I've had it happen multiple iterations. So my coaching past is 15 years long. Started with a group called Atticus, and I remember I was in this little tiny conference room with a staff of about 10 people. Half of them were like, this is stupid, they're no longer here. The other half we outgrew. And so you go through all these iterations of growth, which tend to happen in like you said, 500 to 750,000. All of a sudden you're looking around, you realize I don't have all the answers. Stuff is breaking. And then it happens, you make $1 million. It happens, you make $2 million. It happens at $3 million, and all different iterations. And all the while you're evolving differently as the owner and leader. Yeah. And it's funny because I'm going through a certain level of angst. I was talking to Jules before you got on, and I was like, man, am I having like a rough stretch of a day, because I'm going through a branding exercise right now that is probably the largest paradigm shift in brand that I've done in a very long time. Yeah. Marketing driven. Mm-hmm. But it's causing me that internal anxiety because for so long I've had one name, one color scheme, and all of a sudden it's shifting again. So it's funny that you bring it up in this context.
So is this like a shift away from like TonaLaw to more of a like trade name type of situation?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a couple of coaching clients who are looking at doing that. And it is weird because if we zoom out from it, it should be a kind of, I don't know, who cares? It's just a name, right? It's a name that maybe expands things. But because, I mean, the legal profession, and this is one of the many reasons why I love working with lawyers, is there is this very anchored identity that often comes from generations of legacy attorneys who have passed down their names, wanted to see their name go on. And the name has been like, what's in a name? So much in the legal profession. And that desire to hold on to it holds deep. And yet if we were to probe right now and like really go after it, no one can give a really strong rationale for it.
Right. And I'll tell you what, as we're talking about, so I'll tell you the name of the firm. It's brand new, and it's the New York Personal Injury and No Fault Collections Law Firm, PC. I purposely want my name out of it. It's going to say powered by TonaLaw on the website and on, I'll keep the continuation of the brand at least for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the anxiety, I've been one name for since 2001. This is the first time I've ever even publicly announced a name. We haven't put it out anywhere yet. So man, you really triggered something with the initial conversation about the identity, man. I feel like I'm talking to my therapist right now.
So that's what coaching clients say all the time. They're like, hey, when did this turn into a therapy session? I was like, I didn't decide it. I just asked the question, but that whole, oh yeah. Like whenever someone says that, I go, yeah, it's cool. This is business therapy. Like fundamentally coaching to a degree is business therapy. I'm there to help you find out more about who you are. And the way to make that move a little bit faster at times is like, I can give you some high percentage based decisions that you can make on behalf of your firm in order to accelerate your progress, as long as they are in alignment with who you are, because like, I can't make you be someone that you're not. It's it's like that old idea of creating a marble statue. Like the statue's already inside the marble. The job of the artist is to chip away everything else.
Right. And again, having gone through the coaching world and paradigm for over a decade now, 15 years roughly, I kind of see where I'm at right now as the epitome of it, which is, keeping the name Tona in a corporation that is a real business that produces multiple, 7 figures in revenue every year is not as sexy to somebody who wants to buy it as a real corporate name. Right. So yeah, it's part of the succession planning that I'm doing and everything else. But yeah, man, it's causing me a lot of anxiety right now.
So Jules, how often is Tom using the phrase like, yeah, but people know who Tom is? Like, how often is he dropping that phrase?
A lot, especially because this has been a conversation, I think, for a couple years. It's always been back and forth. And I'm always like, oh, but TonaLaw has such a nice ring to it. And Tom's like, people are sick of me. Like, he's like,
matter of fact, like, I'm removing myself. So I just made one of my biggest hires, which is a very senior trial attorney. And the game plan is I should, again, I haven't been in files for about 10 years, but now completely out of even the management end of the operations, right? The management of PI and no fault and the two silos that I have. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a lot of change. Yeah. And so to your point also, those identity changes happen. And what's challenging, and I'm sure you see this, is when you go back to the rest of the firm, like, okay, we've just changed, right? Because the process starts at the head or in a conference room with the leadership team after doing, core values exercises, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
The real challenge is now you got a firm of, we're at almost 30 internal and 15 overseas in the Philippines. So 45 people. That's a tougher shift to make for me and for the rest of the firm. And we see it. Jules can tell you firsthand the growing pains that she's seen over the last 18 months as a result of the coaching stuff. So how long have you been a coach concentrated with law firms?
So I like to say that I've been working in, for, with, and on law firms for about 14 years now.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And so is it just you? You have other coaches with you? Is it just you right now?
Don't currently, I'll say currently, have other coaches with me. Right now it's myself, and we have several team members, and we're growing. But for the most part, it's me working with law firm owners on either a one-on-one or in a group like mastermind setting. I have my Genesis Mastermind program that has 14 firms in it. And, you know, right now, and the reason I say like right now is because as we see some of the tools, some of the coaching tools settle into place, I look forward to being able to find new ways to deliver those to folks. But right now I'm enjoying the intimacy of each of these individual entrepreneurial journeys. And, you know, look, you gave me a scoop on your upcoming trade name. I'll give you my little inside baseball here, which is there's a second business on the horizon. So I'm also trending in that direction and putting together my next entrepreneurial venture as well.
Oh, nice. Exciting. Nice. Yeah. Is it related to the same field?
It is working with law firm owners, and it's, I'll just go ahead and say it's going to be email marketing for law firms, which I see as a huge gap. I see as a huge
and
gap
traditionally, right your background is in marketing, right?
I mean, yeah, that would be the anchoring point for sure. Was so like when I first started working for Ben Glass, and I was working at his firm, Ben Glass Law, I was doing a lot of marketing for the law firm, and then as I started focusing more and more on his other company, Great Legal Marketing, that I was at for that, I really was like my solo focus for the last 8 or 9 years before opening Law Firm Alchemy. In there, it was a lot more like I would describe it as pattern recognition, where over time, as I was seeing this laboratory worth of law firms and paying really close attention, sometimes asking the questions, sometimes just listening in on the conversations that were already happening, and recognizing certain patterns of success, none of which, and this is important to everyone who's listening to this show, none of which were 100%, right? Like there's no such thing as a 100% success rate on anything.
Right, right.
Yeah, you had a Jeff Hughes on recently, at least as we're recording this, and he was talking about, you know, he was 3 of 9 on his businesses, right? 3 successes, 6 failures. And that's the idea, is we want to have the best odds possible. And so I was picking up all of these patterns and starting to assemble them, which moved me away from just marketing into understanding marketing, operations, finance, which is sort of the triangle that I coach on. I sort of say marketing's job is to create problems for operations, where we're stacked full of cases. Then operations has to solve those problems, usually by hiring people, which then starts to panic finance, who now has to figure out how marketing is going to more wisely invest into getting more cases to fund all this. And if each part is causing a problem for the other part, we're probably doing our job relatively right.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a great way to break it down, because I was literally just talking to my accountant, and we had a conversation about how he's probably leveraging the best he ever has now that he's opened his own firm. He opened his own firm, and we were going through it, and I was like, man, you was so woefully under leveraged that it was a real frustration point. You're a great accountant, but we started to go through the never-ending cycle, right? So I hire a great trial attorney, and I got a very seasoned personal injury negotiator. So then I go into palpitations of they're going to eat through inventory fast. I better ramp up the marketing. So all I've been focusing on is the marketing. And then the finance side is on the phone with me going, hey, man, you're spending money left and right. Right.
We have to have the discussion of something called a burn rate, Tom. And yours is high.
Yeah. When did you come to the realization that you were like, I love working with lawyers and law firms. This is what I want to do, and I want to open my own business? Like, when did you come to that realization?
Yeah. So for me, I always knew that I wanted to own something. Ownership. That's technically a bit of a lie, because I didn't know how much I wanted to own my own business until I saw it up close. So my dad was an FBI agent. My mom was a teacher. So like entrepreneurship wasn't really part of the thing. We were very much Midwestern, middle class, get a middle management type of job, right? That's everything was going to be down the middle. But by the way of moving around a bunch and doing theater and sort of finding myself as an artist, it gave a little bit of a black sheep effect for me. So I always knew that middle management was not going to be a great place for me. I have a very hard time with other people's rule sets, like an extraordinarily difficult time with it. It drives my wife crazy. So we were at the lake recently, and I said, "Oh man, I'm going to go jump off of that over there." Something that was kind of uncomfortably high into the water, and she was like, "No, you're not. That's a bad idea." I was like, "Well, now I have to do it, right? Because you told me I'm not supposed to, and I'm wired to buck against that." So, getting the job with Ben out of college, and then seeing up close entrepreneurship, both through Ben, but then also through these firm owners that I was working with and all these associated vendors and businesses in the law firm support and success space. A few years in, I knew that ownership would be a path for me. I love the responsibility. Obviously the rewards are great, but it's just that charting my own course component, and knowing that if I screw up, I got to own it. And if I win, I get to own that too. And that's really fun. And then, I don't know, the working with lawyers part of it all, it's strange. I try to describe this to people, Tom, but it's hard to explain the fact that the idea of that it's specifically working with lawyers, like it's not front of mind. It's like somehow it's past my brain. It just is what I do. And part of it is I've done it for so long. I've cataloged so much information, but I also have so many relationships. Like I don't see myself as an outsider anymore, even though I don't have a JD. I never went to law school. I haven't owned a law firm yet, private.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I know a good one in New York. It'll be for sale soon. No, I'm just joking.
Oh, there we go. So there'll be opportunities for partnership in the future, but yeah, it just came to a point where it was time, and the universe sort of gave me a signal, and it was a kind of a put up or shut up moment. Like, hey man, are you going to be an entrepreneur or not? Are you going to do this thing? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. Let's go do this. And so starting it, putting it all under my control was just a natural step for me.
And how long has Law Firm Alchemy been in business?
So we're just shy of a year at this point, which is kind of hard.
Oh, nice.
To believe.
Congratulations. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. It'll be a year on July 1st what year? It's 2024. I'm having trouble with years. I think we all started messing up our years once COVID hit, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
What does a year mean anymore? But yeah, it'll be a year. So, and getting close to, not too long after that, it'll be 15 years I will be working with 4 law firms. I love it.
Very nice. Very nice. I love it. So
that's awesome.
The mission is to help lawyers and law firms grow their marketing and leadership, right?
Yeah.
And is there like a set, like, so with EOS, my coach said, look, it's basically 2 years to get through the entire curriculum.
Yeah.
And then you do what you want to do. If you feel confident, first of all, I'm not the guy that's ever going to have the discipline to run quarterly meetings and stuff. So I'm like, listen, we're just going to stay on doing this the way we're doing it because it works. Is there a set curriculum you have? Like, how long is the initial kind of training that you do? And then what does that look like after?
Yeah, so it's a good question, because I say that we're partially curriculum and then we're partially customized, right? So there's custom and there's curriculum that goes side by side. So I have a few key components I'm going to look at whenever I get into any law firm. Like the first thing I would want to do is perform a health check. And the main health check that I would do is I want to know what your revenue looks like, your projected revenue for this year, what your revenue was for last year. And then I do a revenue per employee check. We talk about patterns.
Interesting.
Back around 2017, 2018, I guess the idea was really triggered closer to 2016 because it was shortly before my second kiddo was born, where I had some money. I started investing more in the stock market, and I was looking at like some of the numbers that were available, and I noticed that they had this revenue per employee number that you could see at certain companies. And you have like some of these oil companies that have, $800,000 per employee, these wild numbers. And I was trying to consider like, I wonder if that could be applied to law firms. And so I started asking some of those questions. How much revenue did you do in the last year? How many team members did you have at the end of last year? Okay, let's start doing some math. And so I'll perform a health check on a law firm. And like the easiest thing is the average $1 million law firm has, including the owner, has 7 employees. Okay. That's one of our baseline points of math, because between about $500,000 to about $3 million per year in revenue, it's about $150,000 per employee in revenue, with a band that goes between 125 to 175, right? So I'm going to perform that health check, and we're going to figure out, first and foremost, are we trying to accelerate growth because we have available resources? Are we trying to put you into growth mode because you're perfectly balanced right now and I need you to kind of get off your plateau and take that leap? Or are we right sizing the ship because we're over leveraged with team members and we don't have the resources to grow now, so we need to be really, really efficient? And from there, after we have that, now I'm going to start looking at what metrics are we tracking? And I have sort of a 3 core metrics program that I'm going to put people on until they're ready for something more expansive. Because if I can't get you to track 3 core metrics like signups, and if it was a PI firm, it would be how many signups did you get in the last month? How many demand packages did you send in the last month? And how many cases did you close out, as in like fully distributed, right? Not that you signed it and we're going to have this kind of pseudo accounts receivable problem going on, the distribution issue.
Right.
How many actually went out the door? So we'll get on those 3 core metrics, which are signups, production metric, and inventory metric. It's funny you used the term inventory earlier, Tom, because I always, the job of a law firm is not to build up an inventory. The job of a law firm is to move cases. So like you're talking about, hey, now you got people who are moving cases. Now you can get to all right, I got to build up that inventory again.
Right.
Most firms just want to build inventory and they have trouble clearing cases. It's a weird mindset thing, right? Where they're scared of, oh, if I clear them, then all of a sudden I don't have cases. Yeah, but then you have money. That's
I was just going to say, I'm like, you're sitting on a mountain of cash, you then reinvest in the business, of course.
Yeah, it's like yeah, Jules.
Sorry. So you kind of come in from an angle where, like, obviously you're not telling a lawyer how to lawyer. They should know how to do that relatively well on their own. You're more so coming in and trying to fix like the connection between the marketing, the operations, the finance, and making sure they all flow and all create those solvable problems for each other. Would you say?
Yeah.
Really
so
like
I'm really helping them become, if you have that spectrum, and I think Craig Goldenfarb does a good job of illustrating this at his 7-Figure Attorney Summit. You have that spectrum of like, on one end, you have the word entrepreneur, on the other end, you have lawyer. And I want to shift you very far in the direction of entrepreneur. I'm usually starting with people who are going to be between about that 20 to 40% range on that spectrum. And I want to get you up towards that 80 to 100% range on that spectrum. And the way that we do that is you have to have confidence in yourself as an entrepreneur. Why do we not move away from lawyer? Because you're comfortable, you're confident, you know what that looks like. You know how to write the contracts, to strategize, you know how to write the memos, you know how to be in a courtroom, you know how to handle a deposition. You get what that is. But when all of a sudden, like first time you have to deal with an accountability or org chart, right? That is, you're wrestling with something brand new. It is uncomfortable. And I want you to feel confident in that. And to do that, I have to help you install those tools, those skill sets. Like if you can write a great headline and you know how to write a great hook, get attention, you're going to be more excited to do marketing, which means now I can get you to abandon some of those lawyer responsibilities and hire someone to take care of those, because you can focus more on the marketing, and we're going to move you past writing headlines and have you more focused on big, broad strategy. Like at what point are we moving into broadcast media? What's our digital buy look like? Have you actually established, are you going to use like a story brand framework, or is it the EOS framework? We need you to have those tools. So that way you go, I'm practically forgetting how to be a lawyer because I'm so much of an entrepreneur now.
Yeah. I do a couple of masterminds with Craig and a couple of other, fairly well coached entrepreneurial business owners in the law firm space. And we have all sat around the table going, the lawyers that we have working for us do it better than us now on the technical side, because there's 2 sides to that coin, right? Very rare is a lawyer going to come through the doors that can run the business side of it the way I've been doing it for the last 17 years, 18 years, to where it is now. And then conversely, I focused so much on the entrepreneurial side over the last 15 years that, the person who's in court trying a case every 2 months, of course, they're going to be sharper, more advanced in their skill set in the trial space. So what do you do? And I'm always curious because, like, I talked to a gentleman today. He's in probably his 6th decade of life, and he's just like making his first real hire, right? And so there are people that are what do you do when you're faced with that full resistance of, I'm a lawyer and this is who I am, but they're still paying you to, hey, Charlie, I want to do this other thing,
So this is a conversation that I'll relate back to parenting. So with my kids, because that person's probably not paying me for one simple reason. Because I have a philosophy of and I word it very carefully, and I say this to my kids all the time. We first help those who help themselves. I am not looking to take the person who is aggressively anti-entrepreneur side of themselves and convince them. That's not even leading the horse to water. That's like getting the horse to leave the barn. And that's not what I'm looking forward to. I'm already out in the wilderness. Like, I want to go have fun out there. So now, that being said, I have worked with some of those folks a long time ago, right? And I have that conversation from time to time. The thing that I would hope to do in that moment is to plant a seed, or really a seedling, because I think others at that point have probably planted the initial seed with them, because they're asking the question, right? That's a start. Good on them for asking that question. Mm-hmm. But I would like to then put a seedling in there where I'm going to ask them, what would life look like in 5 years if you did nothing in this moment? Is that what you want your life to look like? Okay, then we know one thing for sure. You have to make a change. I may not be able to force you to make the change, but you now fundamentally know that you have to make a change, and this is why I refer to, like, for me, entrepreneurship was a put up or shut up moment, or you have to accept that that's not who you are going to become. And that's okay. It's just that's all right. Not everyone is meant to have, the 8-figure firm or even the 7-figure firm. And that's okay. Like, I'm not going to judge that person's journey either. They're just
everybody. Listen, I read an awesome thing on Reddit this morning, and it said, somebody said, I'm contemplating opening my own law firm. I'm just finishing up the bar exam. Can you tell me what your experience was, et cetera? And one of the first answers was brilliant. It was a family lawyer. I was actually like, it sounded like Jeff Huff, because the guy's like doing, multiple 7, closing in on 8 figures. And they went through the stages, but you can't make somebody something they're not, right? So I've had people like, I want you to coach me. I'm like, well, what's your biggest issue? I don't have time for anything. I'm miserable about that. So I said, okay, let's set up next month's calls. Oh, I don't want to set them up. We're just I want to do, I'm like, and there's the issue, right? Like, I don't have time. I'm the same as you. Like, I don't want to work with people on that front that, it's one thing to say you want something, and then act in alignment is a completely different thing. And we actually, Jules and I were at Pilma, and we heard, what was the guy's name? Bert. Jules, that was the COO of Waffle House, and then he became the president of Waffle House.
He has the Bert Thornton.
Bert Thornton. Dude, the guy has 2 books, and it was a keynote. So I'm like, I'm expecting a keynote to be like, I don't know if I'm going to get much out of a keynote. Is it more inspirational? This guy, I couldn't even keep up with the wisdom this guy was spitting.
Really?
And the reason that I'm telling you this is he laid out what makes a good mentor-mentee relationship from both sides. And it's kind of the same thing in the coaching side, right? So my coach, I still have a coach, Patrick Wilson, who's from Atticus, and he coaches me once a week for an hour. And basically he's like, you got to get crystal clear, because now you're running multiple businesses. You got to get crystal clear on who do you want to work with in the coaching space? What does that look like? And, And one of the keys is it's got to be somebody who's a strong implementer, right? You can't say you want to work on time management and then tell me you don't want to calendar calls. That's a contradiction I can't overcome. So what I do love too, and I've read a lot of your stuff on LinkedIn, and I listen to you. What's the name of your podcast again?
They don't teach this in law school.
Yeah, and I love
all
that.
the time.
They don't teach, but they don't teach a lot of it. They didn't teach us anything you need to know for the majority of lawyers that will hang up their own shingle and do their own thing on the business side. I do love that Ryan McKean is now.
I was going to break. Yep.
Teaching at his old college, right?
Yeah.
I think he went to, I forget the name of it now, if it's Fairfax or I forget the name of the college. But he's teaching a business class for lawyers at the law school. And I was like, that's amazing. That's amazing.
I know that Guy Sakalakis, when he was on my podcast, he mentioned I can't remember what university it was, but you're starting to see a couple of these semi-entrepreneurship programs pop up within law schools. And I mean, as long as if all of them could have a Ryan McKean doing them, right, it would be amazing. That's what really needs to happen. That'll transform the industry.
I think it's amazing in general, given the statistics of how many lawyers will try to open their own law firm, right? It's some staggering number that most lawyers will end up trying to open their own law firm. And then it got me thinking, like, even with my accountant's fantastic account. And I would tell him for years, dude, you gotta start leveraging. You need more people. You gotta but his partners were holding him back on that front. You know, they eventually disbanded, and now he's hired his 8th accountant in literally the first 2 months that he's been out on his own.
Oh my goodness.
But he's got that much business. He's so good. He's such a great accountant. And I refer people to him all the time. Now I feel much more comfortable because he can actually handle the business I'm sending him. You know what I mean? So
that's right.
But it's always an interesting thing. Like, he went to school for business. But they don't teach you the owning your own business and the leverage points. So
every single professional degree is about working within that profession. It's never about how to start your own thing. Right. I mean, it's
how to be the technician.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny. I talk about this all the time. Like, the way that you make money in life, there's sort of 4 stages of how you make money. The first way you make money in life is you get paid for what you do, right? We all had something that we learned how to execute on. We have a skill that we can execute on, and we get paid for what we do. I don't care if that's like laying bricks or it's taking a deposition. You're getting paid for what you do. Next way that you get paid in life is you get paid for what you know. You build knowledge, expertise, experience off of all of that. And that allows you to maybe charge a higher hourly rate, right? Or you get elevated to a higher position within the firm or whatever other business. From there, most people get stuck at the you get paid for what you know, because it's fun to know a lot of stuff. I got trapped there for a long time. I love knowing a bunch of stuff. Like, my hobby is having hobbies. My interest is having interests. I love having all the different bits of knowledge that I possibly can. And yet I'm really bad at trivia games. I don't know how that happens. So the next way that you get paid, the third way you get paid, is you get paid for who you know. Now, most people don't go this route because most people are introverts, or at least they lie to themselves and say I'm an introvert when in fact we're all ambiverts. We could do a whole diatribe on that. Identity issue right there, because you start thinking you're supposed to shrink away. Oh, I don't want to like collide with the world. Oh, that would be so impolite of me. My Midwestern Protestant mindset just insisted that I stay off to the wall and let other people take the space. And then the last stage is you get paid for who you are. Now, here's the thing. Most people want to skip past that third stage. This is the huge issue that I encounter, especially in our social media era. Everyone wants to be a freaking celebrity. Everyone wants to be famous. And they want people to know them before they ever bother to try and know other people. And if you're not a person who wants to know other people, that you're at best case scenario, you're building a house of cards. Worst case scenario, you're going nowhere, and you're going to come across as just egotistical. You're going to come across as self-obsessed. And by the way, a lot of people will go through that and they'll recognize like, oh, I actually, oops, I've kind of overstepped my bounds. I need to focus on getting to know other people before people are going to take an interest in me. So that's like one of those identity issues that I work with law firm owners on, is moving through those stages and not trying to skip ahead too hard and too fast.
Right. That's really interesting, because there is a big psychological mindset component to that.
Oh yeah.
It's
It's easy to get addicted to like how much engagement you're getting on LinkedIn or Instagram or YouTube or any, the vanity metrics. It's like, yeah, I can put my impressions number up on my mom's fridge. It's not really going to do me any good. What's the depth of connection that I'm making? That's what matters.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And are you helping people? Are you providing value and helping people? So, and one of the things that ties into that, which is awesome that it's on here, is we have similar core values, right? So yours are intention, maker, faith, lead, courage, and candor. Very similar, right? And we got crystal clear on our core values through EOS. Did you go through some process where you got crystal clear on those core values?
Yeah, and actually, it's funny.
One of the things I got to put out is, how old are you?
About to turn 37.
37. I'm 55. And that's why I was asking, because normally, and again, I try to really remain curious. So when I heard your name, I would ask people like, oh, what's been your experience? I have heard amazing things. And I can't remember the last person I spoke to. I'm talking like in the last week or two.
Wow.
Somebody mentioned your name, and I forget where. It may have been at Pilma. And I said, oh, I know what Charley does, and I know of his company. How is it working with him? And the person was gushing, like could not say enough. So it's clear you're putting in a lot of time, a lot of effort. And that's why I asked you specifically how old you were, is I don't want people to ever judge you at 37 based upon the fact that, I'm 55. You got so much to give in terms of what you're talking about with law firm owners and business owners, that, to be crystal clear on core values. I mean, I wasn't crystal clear on that I knew what was important to me, but I didn't get crystal clear on that until in my 50s. I had already owned this business over 20 years. So that's pretty impressive of itself. How did you get crystal clear on those core values at the point you're at right now?
So, and I'll tell you kind of the fun thing. So the core values that you listed, you know how you're supposed to update your website when things happen?
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, that's on
here's
Jules. That's on Jules.
It's entirely on me. I own this, Jules. That's on me. So actually the core values that I published on there, mind you, they all very much apply, but they've gotten a little bit refined since then, because that was written in like when I was setting up the website, and it's like Saturday night and you're like, okay, I need to fill this out. The truth is, when I did deep examination, you'll hear some of them still apply. And I talk about having my 3 head values and my 3 heart values. So my 3 head values are intention, learn, action. My 3 heart values are love, courage, and loyalty. So still very, very, there's a lot of overlap.
Very similar.
Yeah. And the reason I put like faith and candor on there I had a long list that included the ones that I just talked about, and I put some of those on there because those were the first ones I could think about how to write about them. So like faith and candor, the only reason that they're not on the list right now is when I examined like really what are the core values that are just as important internally as they are externally, the communication modalities that we need to use as a team, as much as they are people understanding who I am and what I'm all about. I found a lot of people didn't understand the idea of candor, so it was harder to communicate. And faith was more of representative of like my ideal client profile, is that usually I'm working with people of faith. I'm a person of faith myself. So that's the reason that those didn't stay on there long term.
Gotcha.
But as for forging core values, the 6 that I mentioned have been with me for a long time. I actually took them off of a document that I started writing for myself, a yellow legal pad that I started writing 2017-ish when I was staying at the beach. It would have been right around then, because I really started forging some of this stuff for myself right when my second kid, Cassidy, was born, who's going to turn 7 this summer. And in putting that stuff together in terms of solidifying it, one of the things that I'm grateful for is I did encounter someone like Ben coming right out of college, right? I've been around people who talk about these lofty ideals of having core values, of having purpose, of, living a life by your own design. And I'm at least smart enough to be too dumb to challenge those idealized concepts and to just do them. So I know that I've made choices that they're coaching clients, and I work with clients who are, let's see, as young as 33 and as old as, I think my oldest client is 62. And I just happen to accumulate some of these experiences, be smart enough to be dumb enough to follow through on them without over analyzing it and saying, well, this is why it's not supposed to work. And sort of saying like, I don't know, it seems to have worked for some people who I really respect who they are. Why not just do it a couple decades before other people get around to doing it? Right. That has been my good fortune in all this, including the core values, which I started experimenting with some time ago. And I've done many core values exercises through the businesses that I've been with before and for clients themselves. And so again, just being not overthinking the process and trusting it. And also I will say, when it comes to core values, the funny part that I found about core values is it's core values, right, Tom, right, Jules? It's like, it's supposed to come from really within you, like who you are, how the business operates, et cetera. And yet how many times are we doing core values by someone else's rules on how we're supposed to phrase them, how we're supposed to frame them? Like, is that really core values? Because it seems like there's 18 different formulas for handling this. Maybe, just maybe, there's not one way to handle these things. So like, head and heart values, that's just kind of what happened when I was organizing them. Didn't set out for it to be 3 and 3 either, just happened to fall in place. And there are times when people hear that and they go, oh, so do I need head and heart values? I'm like, oh, no, you need your values. That's what matters most.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny because I love the way you just described how those evolved for you, because anybody that says, well, I sat down, I had this big epiphany, that's nonsense. That's just not how it happens. And I had a very similar thing. Like probably when I first started out, I was like, okay, what am I going to put on my website? And I remember looking at the U.S. Marines, they had whatever theirs were on their website. And I was like, okay, this was back in 2001. I'm going back that far. And it wasn't until I got crystal. And yes, so you go through iterations. Anybody who has true core values that they are guiding principles for themselves and their business, it has been, to use an analogy you used earlier, a process similar to making a sculpture, right? You start stripping away, it looks like something. You keep stripping away, it gets crystallized down to the 6 words you just did, right? Yeah. Ours, we have 6 as well. What, interesting enough, one of them, and it's one of my favorites, is kind candor, which I got from Gary Vee's book 12 and a half, because that was a light bulb moment for me. Because as confrontational as I can be as an ex-litigator, I still am. Anytime you put me on a phone with an adjuster, which is why nobody puts me on phones with adjusters. But I was like, holy crap, it spoke so deeply to me that I then embraced it. And I was like, oh, as the leader, I have to embrace 100% candor in communications while always maintaining kindness and empathy. Right. So, I don't think people struggle with the concept of candor. I think people struggle with candor. Period.
That's true. That's
more so on the internal side of communicating outward. Not even necessarily hearing it. It feels bad if Juliet has to say something to me. For Juliet, it's going to feel confrontational. Also, knowing her disc, she's a high I. She likes to get along with people. She's a relator. So if Juliet has to say something candorous to me or to anybody, that is probably more problematic for her than if I have to say something direct and candorous to her for her to hear, is what I find. At least that's what was true for me. Like, I was afraid of hurting people when in fact it's a gift to be candorous to people. as long as you're being kind, you're not an a-hole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll be curious. Let me throw out like the way that I define candor to people. I'm curious if this will resonate with the two of you. So when I talk about candor versus honesty, the way that I talk about it is like honesty is going up to the exact line of the question that was asked and stopping exactly there. Candor is going up to the line of the question that was asked and then giving the extra bit of information that they didn't ask for that is important for them to know and may representing you extending yourself past your own point of comfort in order to put more cards on the table. That's the way that I think of candor. Does that resonate with you all?
I love that. It resonates with me for sure, because what you're talking about is context. And you're also talking about what one of my favorite things is, it's emotionally authentic. So I can tell the truth as a lawyer and lawyer the shit out of almost anything, which answers the question, but without the context, am I really being genuinely authentic emotionally to the person I'm talking to on the other side? I want them to understand me and what we're talking about, not just get the answer, because there's a certain level of deception in that. Well, I told the truth and I answered the question, right? That emotional authenticity is what I seek in communication, where a lot of times Jules will know. I'm the type of person where, okay, you want to have a conversation? Let's have a conversation. And I can sense.
Sorry, I'm starting to have a panic attack just hearing that tone in your voice.
Well, no. But you know why? Because when people are like, hey, Tom, I want to talk. Okay, no problem. Yeah. What I seek is emotional authenticity, right? I want to know the context. And I can read people really well after 30 years of cross-examining people. So like Jules knows, like if she wants to have a conversation and I'm sensing something on her face, her demeanor, something, I just keep probing. Because I want that. I want to know what, Jules. Go ahead, say it. What are you going to say?
Yeah, I apparently wear my emotions on my face, because I swear he'll be like, "What's that face?" I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah, look.
Because I'm digging for that emotional authenticity. I don't want to just hear the answer. I want to know the reality. What is the reality, right? Yeah. Like, are we good? Did we have a good conversation where we both walk away better for it? That type of thing. You know?
It's actually one of the reasons I love working with a small group is being able to see the faces and pick up on those cues. So my background being in the acting world, everything was about paying very close attention to the human being right in front of you and following that emotional journey and see what impact it would have. So I got very used to picking up those types of cues. And similar to you, Tom, I look for those even on people that I've just met. You can see those moments of where they're like backing out of a conversation or they've started to think about what's for dinner. And there was a piece of advice that I learned a long time ago, actually taking a master class before it was like the subscription model and they sold individual master classes. Steve Martin did one for comedy. I'll never be a comedian, to say the least, but I did pick up some good communication tools from it. And one of the things that he talked about was the heckler in the audience and really the energy in an audience. He's like, look, if someone is sneezing and they've got that really weird sneeze that causes 20% of people to like turn their head and take a look at it, you would be a fool to not acknowledge that as the person on stage. You've just lost 20% of the energy and attention and more is going to follow. You have to recapture it. So in like a small group mastermind setting, it drives me crazy when a facilitator can't see that person who like suddenly crosses their arms, starts looking off to the side into the middle distance because they're clearly trying to grapple with the concept. And the facilitator doesn't go like, Tom, it looks like you're really working through this. Talk to me out loud about what's going on in your mind right now. Like that, I love those types of moments because it means that someone's paying attention to the human being and to those cues. And like, Jules, I will tell you, I know it drives people crazy when folks like Tom and I do this.
Yeah,
and yet it's a compulsion. I literally can't stop myself from asking those questions because I just want to know. I want to get to the root of it, even if it's going to be offensive, even if you're going to say, I'm sorry, I was really bored in that moment. I'm going to go, great, thanks for telling me that. What gets us back on track?
Right.
It seems like your background with your acting has really helped you gain that kind of emotional intelligence to know and pick up on other people. And then like you can even coach more effectively knowing, like having that background. So it's really interesting.
I will not tell anyone to send their kid to school for theater. Not going to give that advice. It's bad advice.
Definitely not on this podcast.
But I would definitely tell people to go and do a play and to try and work with a good director who's going to encourage you to pay deep attention to the person who's with you, and who's also going to say, you as the character within the scene, define your objective. So this is what creates dramatic tension in a really good play or even musical, is you have two characters who have distinct objectives who within a scene are trying to go about fulfilling their objective, which is likely to collide with the other character's objective. So if you don't come into the world, and this is why one of the core values that we have is intention, if you don't operate in the world with some level of intentionality, you will only be a byproduct of other people's objectives. What's really compelling and interesting is when you have an intention, an outcome that you are seeking, and you are working with another individual who has their own set of outcomes. And now we're going to try and find how these are cohesive or competing, or maybe we're just trying to discover the truth of this moment and then build on that. So like when I'm coming into coaching, I'm there to discover and I'm there to build, because for me, building is like, I just love building stuff so much, physical, mental, etc. So we come into a coaching call and that's like the scene, right? And the best clients are the ones who come in with their own objectives. And now my objective may collide with theirs because they want to tell me one story, but I'm also there to seek the truth of it. And maybe at times to tell them an uncomfortable truth about them because I've worked with them for a couple of years, right? Now we have something that will create actual transformation, the same way that a scene on the stage that is two objectives competing with each other will create some type of transformation in the play and for the audience as well.
What do you think one of the most common things is that you see holding lawyers back from becoming a high profit, law firm?
Ooh, so I'm not gonna use the identity answer since we've gone over that. That would be issue number one, is like they're afraid of the next transcending to the next identity. Although maybe there's something tucked in there that I'm going to mention real quick. Yes. So the thing that so often holds firm owners back as they start to make these transitions is their fear of what other people will think of them, especially their own team members, the people that they've hired. There's a fear that a team member may not be prepared to go to the next level, and consciously or subconsciously grappling with the idea of, oh no, I think that person may only have another 6 months with me, but I've known this person for, in some cases, like 12 years. They've had this person on their team and they're finally ready to make the entrepreneurial leap. And they're going, uh-oh, I'm going to have to send that person out in the wild. What are they going to do without me? Which, by the way, that's just ego talking. They'll be fine without you.
They'll be fine.
Yeah. You're not the only fish in the ocean. Goodness gracious.
Right.
Let's all get over ourselves a little bit. But we do have that moment of fear of what the other people will think about us. And sometimes that's even the friends that we may have. And it could be inside the profession or outside of the profession where, hey, I'm structuring my life in a different way. That whole that Thursday afternoon golf game that I've been going to, I'm realizing that's not as important to me anymore. I'm actually really in love with my law firm right now. And they're going to be like, what, you're too busy for us? It's not that I'm too busy for you. It's that I have a deep passion that's resonating over in this space, and I have to go and chase that right now. And if those people then want to leave you behind, that's scary for a lot of folks. Leaving behind the people who you have in your life right now, it's really tough. Like I moved around a lot as a kid, and I had to leave behind a lot of friends over and over again, right? That's pre sort of like texting and internet days. So, like being able to chat online, sending emails, all that type of stuff. So I didn't keep up with them. I just lost a lot of friends. Blessing and a curse. I know how to move on, but it also means maybe sometimes I'm not as good at keeping people in my life who I should keep in my life. I had to completely relearn that skill as an adult. I had to learn how to be a good friend to people. It's a weird skill to learn, Tom and Jules. Like, it's really strange. Like, it's natural for some people. And for me, I had to teach myself, like, friends reach out to other friends. You haven't touched base with them in a while. Send the text message. You need to think of them. And I had to build that skill set. But that is definitely something that holds people back as much as it's about, I've got to learn something new. I've got to implement something new. It's going to require time, energy, attention. So much of it, that social factor, that fear of what will people think of me. It's crushing. Tom, you must have gone through that.
So it's funny because one of the biggest things we talk to a lot of 7, 8, 9-figure players on this podcast. And one of the most often cited things, and I'll ask you the question next, but I say to people, like, what was the biggest needle mover career-wise for you? And without a doubt, it's been hands down the people I surround myself with, right? So I made a conscious decision in my life very early on that I knew I wanted to be going in certain areas, which meant I had to surround myself with certain people, and I had to align my goal with my behavior with my goal. So I stopped drinking, 15 years ago. Why? Didn't serve me anymore. Right. I never wake up and go, man, I got so drunk last night. I'm so glad I did it. Right now.
Nobody ever
said nobody ever, except everybody goes out and does it. And I'm like, and I don't feel funny. Like there's this new thing that people like, that there's an awkward, oh, you don't drink. What do I care if somebody asks me if I drink? No, I don't drink.
I don't drink either.
It doesn't make me feel comfortable. It might make you feel uncomfortable. I notice that people that are heavy drinkers tend to get uncomfortable around me. But, so I never had the issue of moving on a circle, moving on past certain relationships or whatever, if there wasn't an alignment, right? Mm-hmm. If we weren't cheering for each other and we didn't have the same goals or the same drives, and that wasn't a judgment. It was just, you don't see the things I see, and actually you're judging me for the things that I am planning or wanting to do.
That's right. It's funny on the no drinking thing. So I technically, I have like 1 or 2 drinks a year, and we'll go years without it. Every now and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to share a glass of wine with my wife. But otherwise I don't drink. First off, having one drink, I feel awful the next day, and I'm very future consequences oriented on that. And I'm already putting in a lot of work trying to keep together whatever shape I'm currly in.
Right.
It's a lot of work for only modest results. So like,
it gets harder. It gets a lot harder.
So I've heard. I'm trying to stave that off. But like, when I talk with people about it, and they're talking about going out for a drink, I say, oh, I don't drink, but don't worry. I have very little shame, and I'm always happy to act a fool. As a matter of fact, I will probably seem more drunk than you. That's my promise.
And going back to your answer before, to the common thing that holds people back, I think that applies to obviously not only lawyers, that could apply to anybody. So I actually wanted to ask you, like, did you struggle with that at all when you decided to open your own business and start your own entrepreneurial journey? Because I know, like, that transition obviously isn't easy. So I wonder how it was for you.
I'm lucky. It was easy.
So lucky.
I feel very fortunate. I say it was easy because, and actually I know that, and no one steal this book title from me. I don't think it exists. I feel like I've done my research.
Just go trademark it.
Yeah. Well, and I own the URL for it already. There will be a book that I write called The Overprepared Entrepreneur. I was extraordinarily overprepared for it. I had the good fortune of running GLM for a long time, and I'd seen every side of the operation, having put together the programs, selling stuff, marketing, finance, operations, constructing, deconstructing, this, that, the other thing, right? I was very ready, and I had spent, and this is kind of the answer to the needle mover thing, of one of the fundamental changes in my life is when I opened up my eyes and realized I had to go and make those relationships. I couldn't wait for relationships to come to me. That's not fair to the rest of the world. That's extremely selfish, extremely egotistical. And it wasn't even that egotistical. It was just fear-based. Because I let go of so many people in life, I was always waiting. With any new relationship, I was always waiting to be like, okay, so this is probably going to be the last time I'll ever hear from that human being, right? And when you're always waiting for that hammer to drop, it stunts your ability to invest in the relationships. And when I made that change, I started investing deeply in relationships. First off, health-wise, it was great for me. All of a sudden I had more energy because I had people in my life who I recognized that I could put myself out there and all of it would come back to me in multiple. And the best part is like those relationships are a multiplier. We don't come to the table and go 1 + 1 for each other. Like we end up being like 10 times 10 when I sit at the table with another individual. It's a multiplier effect. And that's the great part of being around those folks and investing in those relationships. And that is having invested in those relationships for many, many years, that paid off in spades when I opened my business. And when I was also able to then build brand new relationships under, my own flag that I was able to fly and be able to have very open, honest, candorous discussions with folks about, hey, here's where we're headed. Here's the partnerships I'm looking to build up. That was totally transformative. So I know how lucky I am in that regard, but I also think that luck is the old idea of it's preparation meets opportunity. And I just prepared way too much for it. But I'll tell you this real quick. On the preparation side, I saw an Air Force pilot, Jared Aranda, talk, the brother of a friend of mine. And he talked about everyone's preparing for a war. They just don't know what that war is going to look like and when it's going to come. And so everything that you're doing in life right now is preparation. You just don't realize it. I didn't realize that building all of those relationships and making myself into that type of person was preparing me for this core skill set that would help me launch the business. But then when it came time to launch the business, it was exactly the preparation that I needed.
Right. You were ready.
Oh,
and
awesome.
it makes sense. It sounds like, so knowing, and I don't know them well, but Ben and his son, they've done such a great job of building a true business, right? That they build leaders within that business. And very often it's a mark of a true leader that he builds other leaders who then go off to open other businesses where it's not even mutually exclusive. You could end up doing business together. It's kind of what happened with me with my old law firm. It was time for me to fly.
Oh, yeah?
I knew it was time to fly. I opened up my own business. And then we made a ton of money together over the years. And it was actually better because the couple of the partners, they had all of these personality flaws that,
wow.
once
you definitely avoided a worse word right there, Tom.
well, once I was a peer making them money, it was different. It was different.
Yes.
I no longer was their punching bag, right? So, and not that I was ever going to play that role anyway, but it's definitely an interesting trajectory, knowing where you came from, knowing what you're doing. Charley, I want to say thanks again for coming on. How do you want people to find you if they're interested in talking further? Is LinkedIn? Is it your website? How do you want people to find you?
Oftentimes the easiest thing, like you're here listening to a podcast right now, you're listening to Lead Counsel, you're in your podcast app, go over and look for my podcast. They don't teach this in law school. Soon enough, Tom's going to be one of the guests on there as well. So
awesome.
At some point you'll see his episode, but we have this awesome catalog of other people. And that's a great place to start since you're already here. But if you want to just be barraged with information, ideas, resources, etc. If you go to lawfirmalchemy.com and find your way onto the email list through any one of the resources, promise it will always be good, interesting, well-curated conversations, ideas, resources. And yeah, sometimes I'm going to try and sell you into a program because I believe in what we provide and who we're providing it for. But that's how we'll get started at the very least.
Awesome. Listen, I will tell you that I am probably the biggest proponent of coaching and masterminds you will ever meet, as somebody who's like, I fly out once a month. I do masterminds conferences all over.
Nice.
And anybody that's listening to this on the fence, fitting within the demographic of what you're doing, it's not an expense. I don't even know what you charge. It's an investment. You're going to make a multiple on the money you put in as long as you put the time in and the resources in.
Yeah.
And execute on the stuff that you learn. By the way, one more last thing. You were kind of implying that you might you're toying around with the format or whatever. That live format, I don't think ever move away from it because it's super valuable. It's super valuable. What do you meet 4 times a year?
We do 3 times a year.
3 times a year.
So because I know there are a lot
do-
of people who fill that kind of like quarterly rhythm
Yes.
type of thing, including EOS. And since we're really for the owner rather than, and obviously it ends up being about the business, but we're so focused on the owner and their skill set, 3 meetings per year allowed us to be off of the quarterly meeting schedule that most people are trying to accommodate, and gives some breathing room for some of these big personal dynamic developments that people are having.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Listen,
And it allows
man,
us
thanks
to
again.
operate through the marketing, operations, finance triangle through the year. That's the other reason.
Ah,
for having 3 meetings.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. Listen,
Yeah.
thanks again for coming on, man. This was a pleasure. I'm looking forward to doing your
Absolutely.
show. All right.
Oh, it's going
Thank
to be a
you so
blast.
much.
Thank you,
Jules,
Jules.
we'll
Thank you.
wrap it up. You
Questions?
good to wrap it, Jules?
Yep.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Lead Counsel Podcast. We hope you found our discussion insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Stay connected with Tom on LinkedIn for updates and more insights. Have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover? Feel free to reach out through our website, TonaLaw.com, or drop us an email at leadcounsel@TonaLaw.com. Until next time, remember to stay informed, stay prepared, and keep leading the way in your journey. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.